Lying about molest. Preventing and responding to false accusations of sex crimes. Lesson 3. Know thyself, guard thyself. Notes for this lesson can be found at shunketsu.wordpress.com. The URL is shown on the slide before you. You can also go over to my blog there and search for it yourself. Okay? In lesson 2, we talked about the type of people who would be more prone to make false accusations of sex crimes. We looked at their motivations, their triggers, their drives. But to be really on your guard against them, you need to practice a lifestyle of reflection and awareness. So at the end of the day, you're thinking through what went wrong that day, what went right, what could possibly go wrong next. Now, what keeps that from descending into just negativity, paranoia, and pessimism is being aware of what Mark McYoung calls normal, abnormal, and dangerous. So normal, everything is cool. Abnormal, you start paying attention to see if there's danger. And of course, if it's dangerous, you take the appropriate action to deal with it. Examples of abnormal: hearing shouts in the middle of the night. That's abnormal. Could it indicate danger? Maybe. If you hear shouts in the middle of the night and it's the World Cup season, it may not mean that there's danger. Yes? Police presence at a public housing area. For example, in my home area, the police don't often patrol. So if I see policemen around my area, I start paying attention. If I see more, I get my kids to be on alert as well. So when you go through your daily life with this type of awareness, you are better able to, number one, know when you can actually relax because you actually are safe. Number two, you'll be able to notice when hostile people are positioning themselves to harm you. Number three, you'll be able to describe their behavior and explain your reactions to the authorities, to the media, and to the police. Simply put, all this is about learning how to prevent crime. I do not study criminal behavior in order to prevent false molest accusations. I studied criminal behavior in order to protect myself from crime. And on 19th of October 2020, the crime I protected myself from was a false accusation of molest. So I hope to expand your awareness, to expand your horizon, to seeking out this type of understanding so that you can better protect yourself and protect your family and the people you care about. Now, when does this start being directly relevant to false accusations of sex crimes? Remember, in the previous lesson, we saw that one of the triggers for false accusations is emotional meltdown. And for that, we looked at the case of Ms. Lovedeep Kwa. Now, if you were present at the argument involving Ms. Lovedeep Kwa, her landlord, and his wife, would you have been able to recognize the warning signs? Now that you know that an emotional meltdown can trigger false accusations, would you recognize that it was getting dangerous? Would you have been able to de-escalate the situation? Or would you yourself have been affected by all the emotions running high and just made things worse? When she's about to melt down, I'm going to be showing you an example of how cautious and how careful you ought to be when you're interacting with a woman who's on the verge of a meltdown. But here's some background to this scenario. Okay, so on 3rd of August 2021, Raisa Khan, then a member of parliament under Sengkang GRC, lied in parliament when she claimed to have accompanied a victim of sexual assault to a police station where the victim was treated insensitively. On 4th of October 2021, she doubled down on that claim in parliament when the Minister for Home Affairs, who oversaw the Singapore Police Force, sought more details in order to investigate the alleged mishandling of the case. Only on 1st November 2021 did Raisa Khan admit that the claim she made on 3rd of August was false. She also claimed that she heard of this alleged case from a support group for women who had suffered from sex crimes, and that she attended that group because she too was a victim of sexual assault. Now, I myself am skeptical of Raisa Khan's claim that she was a victim of sexual assault. But at this point in the proceedings in Parliament, she would be already under immense emotional stress. If she truly was a victim of sexual assault, talking about it could trigger her own trauma. And even if she wasn't, at that exact moment, she was under the scrutiny of the entire Singapore legislature and pretty much the whole country. And she had just publicly admitted to lying in Parliament. That would be immense emotional pressure, regardless. Now, at this point, the leader of the House, Ms. Indrani Raja, steps forward to ask questions of Ms. Raisa Khan. Consider Ms. Indrani Raja. She's appointed by the Prime Minister himself. Before she entered politics, she was a senior lawyer. She is a powerful woman, both before and after entering politics. And yet, if you look at how she proceeded to ask questions of Raisa Khan, you will notice how cautiously she spoke and how carefully she chose her words. Now, I'm not going to read out the interaction here. This screenshot of the transcript, as well as the link to the actual transcripts, is at my notes on my blog. But I include this here to show you the amount of care and caution you should take if you ever need to converse with a woman who's on the verge of melting down. If you expect that you need to do this often, then I suggest you seek out professional training from qualified people. Now, besides when a woman is on the verge of emotional meltdown, what other situations might be risky for you? Another situation that could be risky is hooking up after alcohol. Now, I'm not talking about when there's a pre-existing romantic relationship. I'm talking about you go out drinking, you find a woman who's been out drinking, and the two of you have a one-night stand. Or let's say it's the first date. For example, let's say you've met this woman before, twice, one time to buy masks before the COVID lockdown, another time just to have lunch and chat. But now you're going for your first real date. So you have dinner, then you go clubbing, and she's been drinking. Yes? So she drinks so much that she doesn't think she can clear past the roadblock she claims is between the place and her home. So she says she should just drive over to your home instead. And when she gets over to your bed, she just asks for you to just put a towel on your bed so she can just lie down on it in her outside clothes. That looks both considerate, so she doesn't dirty your bed, and also experienced, yeah? And Let's say at that moment, being the gentleman, you take out a mattress for yourself, you put it on the floor, you're ready to sleep on the floor while she sleeps on the bed. And yet at that moment, she just pats the bed next to her. You can take that as an invitation for you to join her on bed and perhaps have sex, right? But if halfway through she suddenly asks you to stop, can you stop? So why is hooking up after alcohol risky for you? Very simple. Alcohol lowers inhibitions, which means maybe the woman was drinking a lot of alcohol before because she wanted to have sex with you, but felt inhibited. So she drank more so she didn't feel that inhibited. Well, that seems okay. But if she feels less inhibited to have sex with you after alcohol, how about the next morning when the alcohol wears off? How would she feel about the encounter with you? There's also the danger that after the encounter, she will gradually rewrite her memories of the event and come to see you as being sexually coercive or actually assaulting her. And since Singapore has no statute of limitations when it comes to sex crimes or crimes in general, this might just come back to bite you many years after the event. Before I continue, I have to explain what is statute of limitations. In certain countries, there is a time limit, a time frame after which you cannot report a crime. It may be 2 years, it may be 3 years, it may be more. Now, Singapore does not have a statute of limitations when it comes to crimes. So it can happen 10 years, 15 years before. But if the public prosecutor chooses to prosecute you for it, they can. So hooking up after alcohol is risky. I don't encourage it. Another risky situation, having an affair with a married woman. Just don't. The case of Nurshafika Jasmine, which I mentioned in the previous lesson, was not the only case I came across when looking through all the past cases of false molest accusations or false accusations of other sex crimes. Just don't. If you get to know an interesting woman over social media, such as Instagram, and you both seem interested in each other, just ask directly, are you married? Anything less than a clear yes or no answer tells you to be cautious. Now then, a lack of awareness leads to people being unprepared. Sometimes you need to do confrontations. And in the cases of Dr. Yosonam with his confrontation with the sales representative, and for the case of the officers from the Singapore Food Authority who had to confront Wang Shu over the illegal import of meat products, those confrontations went wrong because they did not think of heading off potential problems before the problems arose. Dr. Yosonam and the officers from the Singapore Food Authority probably confronted other people before. And because all those other people they confronted before did not react with such vicious malice, they assumed that things would remain quite problem-free. That's not a safe assumption to make. Because if you're an honest and patient person, it is difficult to deal with dishonest people who escalate hostilities faster than you would. You will always be trying to catch up and most likely failing. You'll be trying to be patient and reasonable when they don't want to be patient and reasonable. They want to get their way. So for the case of the officers from the Singapore Food Authority, their misstep was obvious. They should not have left their colleague alone with Wang Shu, especially when it was clear that Wang Shu was already agitated and emotionally upheaved. Any man left alone with a woman in such an emotional state is at risk of a false accusation of sex crimes. As for Dr. Yo Sonam, however, besides confronting the sales representative with a witness, one of his staff present, he could also have, number one, texted the staff over WhatsApp to indicate he wanted their staff present as a witness during the confrontation. Number two, asked the staff for feedback and impressions immediately after the confrontation. By doing this over WhatsApp, Dr. Yo would have, number one, timestamped the communications, proven that, oh, this happened on this day at this time, before the confrontation, after the confrontation. Second, it would have given more credibility to both his own and his staff's recollection of the events. Now, for this case, because the confrontation happened on 9th of October and the false accusation took place on 12th of October, it may not have made much difference. But because there is no statute of limitations for criminal charges in Singapore, you do not know if any false accusation may arise months or even years after the event. Therefore, keeping time-stamped records promptly to give more weight to your version of the events is an easy precaution you can just simply add to your business processes or even your personal lifestyle. Dealing with a Darvoian woman. In the previous lesson, I brought up Darvo, D-A-R-V-O, which is a common practice of bullies, abusers, and such. When you call them to account for their actions, first, they deny that such actions took place. Second, they accuse the victim of doing some wrong. And after that, they reverse the victim and offender. So they make the victim out to be the real bully, the real criminal, while they themselves are the unfortunate victims in the situation. In the Wang Shu case that I brought up in the previous lesson, it's very clear. Her very threat that, oh, if you do not give her the incomplete report, the incomplete statement, she was going to make a false molest accusation. She already showed you that that's her pattern. She already showed that she intended to play the victim. Now, if you ever capitulate to the demands of such a woman, your well-being is based entirely on whether such a woman is in the mood to keep her promises after she gets what she wants. You can take it for granted that an aggressive woman who uses bullying and intimidating behavior is all ready to cower, cry, and paint herself as the helpless victim the moment you can get any help from the police or you expose her behavior to the general public. However, before you can get to that point, you might face some serious provocation. An example of some of the provocation that can happen. Do you remember the guy from the ops guy story that I brought up in the previous lesson? Well, when this guy tried to resign, his lady boss just blasted at him. Then, after that, she called in the manager. She blasted at the guy in front of the manager. And of course, when the guy was ready to reply to all her vicious statements and accusations, she ordered the manager out. Then she called in the secretary and proceeded to make vicious statements and accusations again. And when the guy was about to reply, she ordered the secretary out. Why? Was it because this lady boss only wanted the manager and the secretary to hear her own side of the story and was afraid that the manager and the secretary would hear what the ops guy had to say? Or was it because she was just flexing her authority to show that, oh, all the staff will listen to what I say? After that, she claimed that the company had incurred external expenses over this guy and demanded that he pay those expenses. because he intended to resign. And of course, when he asked for an itemized account of the expenses, the boss refused to give it to him. She only kept repeating herself saying, "Are you going to pay or not? Are you going to pay or not?" So you see, such provocation may be used to either, number one, intimidate a person into submission, or number two, trigger you into losing your temper and making some huge mistakes. Now, before you get to that point, you ought to remove yourself from that situation. You say, "I do not wish to continue this conversation now. I am leaving and will inform you when we will continue this conversation." And depending on the severity of the conflict, you may wish to have your lawyer present when you resume that conversation. Lawyers. When you have to interact with normal people, lawyers may make things a lot more complicated. They certainly make things more expensive. But when you have to interact with Davoian people, they may be even faster to call in their lawyers than you would. Dealing with Davoian people together with their lawyers is difficult if you do not have good lawyers on your side. Can it be done? Yes, it can. I've done it. I've helped a friend do it. Yes, it can be done. But it requires, number one, you have specialized knowledge. Number two, that you not be easily intimidated. And number three, that you have taken all the precautions before so that those other lawyers do not have loopholes they can make use of. They do not have any of your mistakes that they can exploit. This is very difficult. It's like trying to deal with gang activity without the help of the police. Can it be done? Yes, but it's really difficult and very risky. So, knowing that some Davoian people are quick to call in their lawyers, you may wish to watch out for a woman who runs, let's say, small-scale businesses, but yet has a law firm or retainer. What does that mean? That means whether she has any legal issues or not, she pays that law firm every month. It could mean that she just likes to have lawyers readily available to advise her. Or it could mean that she expects to get into legal trouble often. Or she likes to have her lawyers ready to intimidate people into submission at a moment's notice. Just be alert if you come across such a situation. Now, on your part, however, you may wish to start cultivating relationships with a lawyer now. Find a good lawyer, knowledgeable, reliable. Regularly give that person your business, because you do not want to wait until there are crises hitting you and time is of an essence before you start searching for lawyers. At that point, it can get very difficult. It can get very pressurizing if you don't already know a good lawyer, because the first lawyer you find may not be reliable or useful, and you end up wasting time and money when you cannot afford to. Earlier, I said that when provocations get really intense, you should leave. Most women don't want to leave because they're afraid that they'll be seen as rude. Most men don't want to leave because they're afraid that they'll be seen as cowardly. But when the provocations are that intense, you should leave. And if they physically hinder or restrain you from leaving, that is wrongful confinement. That's an offense under Section 340 of the Singapore Penal Code. It can lead to jail terms, fines, or both. Treat any such case of wrongful confinement as a self-defense situation. Why? Because rapists and murderers are known to move their intended targets away from where they found them to another place, which the professionals call a secondary location. The objective is to move the victim to, number one, where the victim cannot escape. Number two, where other people cannot help the victim. Anybody who commits wrongful confinement on you has achieved both of these goals already. This is known criminal behavior. You cannot just hope that nothing bad will happen. Because, as I said, in that situation, if something bad happens, number one, you cannot escape. Number two, you cannot get help. People can't help you. Remember earlier I talked about normal, abnormal, and dangerous. Once there's wrongful confinement, immediately it's dangerous. What can you do? It really depends. You have to gauge to see, oh, is there anybody there who's a physical threat to you? How immediate is the threat? Can you call the police first? Will the police get to you on time? Complicated and dangerous. To round up this lesson, I'd like to talk about some famous last words. We look at the case of Nicole Dufresne. She was an up-and-coming actress who was out with her friends when they encountered a group of muggers, a group of robbers. And after they were robbed, Dufresne confronted the attackers, and she actually said, "What are you going to do? You going to shoot us? Is that what you wanted?" And as she shouted those words, she walked up to one of the attackers and looked him in the eye. After he pushed her back, she actually bounced back and shouted her question again, "What are you going to do? Shoot us?" And after he pushed her back yet a second time, she came at him again, and this time he shot her. And that's how she died. Famous last words. What are you going to do? Shoot us? Yeah. When you look at such events, when you look at such situations from a distance, it is easy for you to think that you will not be that stupid and say and do dumb things. But as Mark McYoung says, when we are inexperienced with such situations, our emotions and our adrenaline are screaming at us to do something to get things back to normal. Unfortunately, in that uneducated state, we seldom make good decisions about what to do. Without knowledge and experience to help us control ourselves, when we are in that state, our emotions are driving our behavior, regardless of the danger. It's very easy to just do really dumb things under the pressure of that moment. And those dumb things are driven by, if you sum it up, it's just anger and fear. So how do you build your self-control? Number one, when it comes to anger, you just practice restraint in your daily life. If you lose your temper at the drop of a hat in your day-to-day life, when a crisis hits, you're probably going to lose your temper and be unable to figure out what's the best thing to do. You probably do lots of dumb things then. So you start practicing, not in moments of crisis, but in your daily life, you practice restraint. As the proverb says, better a patient man than a warrior, one with self-control than one who takes a city. How about fear? If you regularly put yourself into uncomfortable situations, such as public speaking, martial arts, performing on a music instrument, and while you're uncomfortable, you're nervous, you still practice regulating your behavior then, that gives you some hope of being able to control your behavior when you are under real threat and the fear is very intense. big picture, and this applies to your entire life. It is your awareness and self-control that allows you to switch channels, to mentally prepare for action when situations change and you need to take precautions. This applies whether it's for normal crime or false accusations of sex crimes or whatever. You need awareness and self-control. You also need the awareness and self-control if you have failed to prevent the false molest accusation and you're being questioned by the police. That is the topic of the next lesson, lesson 4. Before we move into that, however, I'd like to ask again, if you have found my lessons useful, please share them. Share the video, share the links to my blog, tell your friends, family that this is useful information and that you think they'll benefit from knowing it. Share. Help me get the word out. Also, if you have questions, my email address is given in my lesson notes. You can email me with your questions, or if you have professional expertise and you'd like to collaborate, contact me through my email, okay? All right, with that said, I'll see you at lesson 4.